Hello, today we will be talking about a movie titled Tenet. Stay tuned. The movie begins as the orchestra is playing in front of the crowd. Armed men storm the scene and kidnap the spectators. The protagonist has a mission to extract a person from a box-like object. The protagonist manages to retreat both safely, but he returns to the building to be removed. In a parked van outside, a group of undercover CIA agents prepared to enter the building. They plan to blend in with the rest of the police. He nearly dies while removing a bomb, but a mysterious stranger miraculously saves him since the bullet the mysterious man fired appears to be traveling backward. The protagonist escapes, but other guys find him on a train and kidnap him. They torture him, hoping he will reveal the identities of his coworkers, but the protagonist stays silent. However, the protagonist then awakens in a hospital bed, disappointed by what happened to him and his team. The protagonist wants to retire, but his employer gives him another job. He learns from his boss that the pill is actually a test to determine whether he is loyal or not, and of course he passes. After being instructed to join an unnamed organization by his boss, the protagonist gets ready for his task inside a windmill before driving to the facility and briefing the scientists there about the nature of inverted bullets. When a pistol is discharged, the scientist explains the bullet's entropy is inverted, meaning that it moves backward rather than forward. When the main character questioned the scientist where the bullets originated from, she said that they were from the future and added that it was possible to invert a bullet, which would mean that everything could be reversed or inverted. The protagonist discovers that Sanjay Singh, an arms dealer in Mumbai, is where the bullets first came from. The protagonist is given assistance by a man by the name of Food, because the location where seeing lives proves to be difficult. Despite it being their first encounter, Neil already knows a lot about the protagonist, which enables the two of them to access scenes by bungee jumping upwards. The protagonist then asks the person who was speaking to his wife about the origin of the inverted bullets for information. Singh's wife Korea confesses that her husband is merely a front for her company as an armaments dealer. After gathering the necessary information, the main character in Neil escapes by bungee jumping once more. Korea informs him that she knows about Tenet and that she sold the inverted bullets to a Russian man named Andrei Cedar. The protagonist is told by Crosby that he can get in touch with Cedar through his divorced wife Catherine Barden. Crosby further says that the protagonist can talk to Cat if he displays a false Goya artwork that was created by a man named Oripa Cat in a repo. We are close, and Cedar discovered this after looking at the false Goya painting and informing her that the protagonist should speak with a rapper about it. Cat informs the main character that his husband is using the phony picture he sold at auction to Cedar to threaten Cat with imprisonment. Shortly after the Cedar's men entered the restaurant, they surrounded the Cat and forced her to leave through the kitchen. The protagonist tried to follow her, but was quickly surrounded by more Cedar's men. He eventually won the battle, but the Cat had already left when he was done. The drawing is kept inside of a Freeport storage facility in an airport in Oslo. The protagonist is told by the Cat when he asks her where Cedar keeps the dry the following day. After Neil has successfully scouted the storage facility, the protagonist has drawn up a plan to steal the drawing. Their strategy is to pretend to enter the facility. Every dude, Neil's connections will also direct an aircraft carrying gold bars in the direction of the storage facility at the same time. As Neil, the protagonist, navigates the various highways, the strategy first seems to be working out nicely. The protagonist of Neil is attacked by two enigmatic men who appeared from a contraption in the final room. One of them is traveling backward. While the main character battles the man walking backwards, Neil chases the other. The protagonist tries to question the mystery man after killing and apprehending one of them, but the man escapes after being shot in the right arm. The protagonist sees Pri again after what happened in Oslo. She explains to him that one of the men is moving backward because of the turnstile and inverting device they signed. The protagonist meets the Cat again after lying to her about finding and destroying the dry. Not there, Cedar inquires about the protagonist's whereabouts from the Cat, who replies that he is a friend of hers. The following evening, the protagonist meets Cedar over dinner. Cedar orders for the protagonist's execution, but later pardons him when the protagonist chooses a love interest. Cedar then asks the protagonist to meet him the following day at 8 in the morning. Cedar tells Cat the following day that the drawing was not destroyed during the incident in Oslo, proving that the protagonist had lied to Cat. Later, Cat and Cedar encounter the protagonist on a boat. Cedar's safety harness is removed by the Cat, who then throws him to the water in the middle of a boating activity. The protagonist rescues Cedar and saves his life in the yacht. The Cat confronts the protagonist about his fabrication of the painting, but she also misunderstands the protagonist's purpose, because she believes he is only there to negotiate a deal for weapons with Cedar. After Cedar summons him, the protagonist gives the cat a gun to defend herself before leaving the room. In Cedar's room, Cedar speaks with the protagonist about plutonium. It's at this point that Cedar tells the protagonist about his background. He grew up in a secret Soviet city called Stuk-12, and that following their conversation, Cedar went to his room with the intention of punishing the cat for trying to murder him, since he had seen a box containing a future message and gold bars. Before Cedar can cause any real harm, however, one of his men alerts him that a metal box has been dropped to the yacht by helicopter. Cedar opens the box to find gold bars inside, and upon noticing that one is missing, he realizes that one of his men has hidden it. Cedar then beats the man to death with the gold. Unaware that he has been spotted, the protagonist is attacked by Cedar's guard, who then takes him to Cedar. Cedar gives the protagonist instructions to go to Tall and steal a crucial item from a truck. The protagonist then gets up with Neil to discuss a highway heist, while Cedar brings his wife to the warehouse. Neil attempts to shoot Cedar with the gun he gave him earlier, but Cedar quickly takes it away and beats her up before the protagonist and Neil are able to pull it off. When they realize that the item in the briefcase is not plutonium but rather something else, the protagonists are annoyed that Cedar seems to be aware of all of their moves and threats Neil. Neil is informed by one of his allies that Cedar is aware of these facts because he sent half of his men back in time. In order to save the cat, the protagonist chooses to go through the turnstile with the cat and the meal and travel back in time to prevent the Oslo incident from happening. His allies inform him of what to do when he is inverted and tell him to wear an oxygen mask filled with inverted air to protect himself from the effects of reverse temperatures. The main character enters the turnstile, reverses himself, and exits the warehouse to observe the world going backwards. He arrives at the location of the trade in a white automobile and displays the inverted after successfully recovering the thing after smashing the white car. She learns that the protagonist had put it there. The protagonist then awakens within a cargo moving backwards toward Oslo. Neil explains the principle of inversion to both Kat and the protagonist at this point. He also informs them of Cedar's plan to invert entropy in order to cause the entire world to travel back in time before it is destroyed. They arrive in Oslo the night of the incident, but the protagonist discovers a bullet wound in his right arm before Neil can treat it, because he believes the airplane had already left. While wearing police costumes, the protagonist and Neil transport a cat into the burning facility, while signaling that they must leave. The protagonist enters first, but quickly realizes that he was actually the mysterious man he had been fighting. Before a fight breaks out between the protagonist and himself, it is also revealed that Neil discovered the man's identity while he was pursuing him. Priya informs her that Cedar is gathering 9 artifacts from the future to put together an algorithm that will allow for the world's inverse entropy. Neil and Kat are preparing for Passover on a ship when the protagonist chooses to halt it, but not until he first promises to protect both Kat and her son from harm. When Kat confesses that Cedar has cancer, the dots start to connect that Cedar wants to kill himself and take the entire world with him. When they are traveling to Vietnam, the protagonist then tells the audience about their intention to travel through time on the day of Kat and Cedar's Vietnam vacation. The 10 will go to mention their hometown on that day. Before embarking on the operation, the protagonist gives Kat a phone and instructs her to call him if she ever feels unsafe. The mission breaks into 2 teams, Red Team and Blue Team, with Red Team consisting of troops that move and keep regular time, while Blue Team will consist of forces that do not. The protagonist and the leader of Red Team Eyes will split from their team and handle the algorithm on the day of the mission. Kat goes to Vietnam and manages to persuade Cedar that she is her past self, while a great battle takes place in Stuk-12. The team will be made up of inverted troops, and the plan is for both teams to arrive at the battlefield at the same time. The protagonist and I have managed to separate as both regular and inverted troops storm Stuk-12. However, the entry closes as they cross a tripwire inside the underground facility, where the protagonist notices a dead Blue Team member lying on the ground. Neil, who is inverted, repeatedly tries to warn the protagonist about the tripwire by removing his inversion and reading vertices to no avail. They fought to open the door on the other side, while one of Cedar's goons handles the algorithm outside. In the meantime, in Vietnam, the protagonist manages to capture and kill Cedar, following which she jumps into the sea and escapes on a boat. Yes, so that no one can discover it. But as Neil grants the protagonist his peace, he also discloses that it was the protagonist who had chosen to hire him to join the 10 in the future. He adds that although this hasn't happened yet, They have actually known each other for a long time. The protagonist asks Neil if anything will change in the future, to which he responds that what happened back in Britain when Korea attempted to assassinate Kat for knowing too much, but the protagonist stops her by killing her after guessing. As Neil is leaving, the protagonist notices his backpack is the same as the inverted dead blue soldier that saves him earlier. The protagonist of the film comes to the conclusion that he is the brains behind Tenet after learning what Priya will do and receiving information about the location and time of the Kat's call. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to get more of our recaps.